Roger, go for deploy.
Welcome back to Adventure Fit Radio. Today we basically have a great guest, but we've got a kind of a guest co-host as well. So Tommy Sira's in the house.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for having me back for my third or fourth time, I think, Bill.
Something like that. Something that Tommy's helped me run this interview with Gordon Young. So Gordon, you are an ethicist, I believe.
That's me, yeah.
Cool. Thanks for coming down. Why don't you tell us, Gordon, a little bit about yourself and what it is you do?
Oh, no problems, man. So I teach professional ethics, work up at RMIT, doing some lecturing there, and run a small consultancy off the side. Teaching ethics, which is mainly with local governments at this point, but we're branching out to corporations and that sort of thing at the moment. Mm-hmm. So, a pretty wide-ranging variety of interests you can fit within ethics, but for the most part we do governance, decision-making methods, leadership training, that sort of stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
And it's not every day you meet an ethicist, let's be honest.
Definitely the first time I've ever met one.
I haven't got any mates that are ethicists. Hopefully by the end of today, if the show goes well, I'll have one.
It's a good title.
Yeah.
There's not many of us, actually. It took me a long time before I was even willing to pop it out in public.
Really?
Wow.
Wow.
I'm an ethicist. I mean, you go and study the Masters of Ethics, so that's my claim.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you want to make sure you're any good at it, right?
Yeah.
But it took a few years practicing in the in the dark and the shadows, so to speak, and I make sure this is actually good.
Yeah.
Actually, I can draw it back to one event. I decided to double down a little bit or put my money where the mouth is, and went out and did a conference talk for the Australian Association of Professional and Applied Ethics, which is a whole bunch of academics, basically. I figured if I could get it past them, I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
And they didn't have any criticism for me, so I started calling myself an ethicist.
Yeah, 100%. I was expecting maybe some sort of a greyish, longer beard.
Gandalf.
yeah, Gandalf. Or what's the weirder wizard? What starts with an Radagast.
Radagast. Oh my God,
maybe Radagast. Yeah. So, that's cool. So where did it all start though? Like, what got you into wanting to study ethics and making it your career?
Well, I used to work in environmental management. Still do on occasion, go back and do that every now and then. But I'm not a scientist. I'm not an engineer. So more or less my job was actually taking the information to a business and trying to convince them to do something they knew they should have been doing, but they didn't really want to do, or understanding why it was they weren't doing that in the first place. Usually cost, usually a bit of fear, that sort of thing. And more or less just sort of realized after a few years of that that's ethics, really. It's just understanding why they're not doing the thing already. So understanding their needs and wants, trying to articulate our position in a bit more detail, adjust it for them. Not dissimilar from marketing in some senses, if you know what I mean. But at the same time, it was about coming at it from a more fundamental basis, which meant that there was less barriers in place, you know. Like if I go up to someone and they say, I don't believe in climate change, and I try and talk to them about the details, it's not going to happen. You know what I mean? You come at it from what motivates that belief. We can get a lot more traction that way. Gotcha. So I went off and I specialised, went and did a master's and started practicing. Yeah.
So what are some examples of some of these things that, like you say, you would go to businesses and you would say, okay, cool, let's look at what you do. This is obviously, it might be bad for the environment, or it's probably, if you've got any examples like that. So is it about trying to sell a better way to sustainably do things economically for, like, you're kind of like selling them on a new system? Is that kind of...
Sort of. I mean, in many ways, it's just helping them understand their own system. Right, so first thing we do inside the front door is sit them down and say, all right, so what is it you want to do here? Right? Like every time I get the same answer walking inside the front door. What's the point of the organisation? Well, to make profit. Yeah, sure, man, but you could be out selling drugs.
Yeah.
Like there's a much higher profit margin than that.
Yeah.
Dedicated customer base, you name it, right?
Yeah.
So, but what do you want to do with the profit, right? You're doing it here for a reason. Lay it out for me. Shouldn't be hard, right? I mean, you know the answer. You're here, but trying to get a clear response to that sometimes can be tricky. So first things first, we articulate it, right? Like, what is it you want to achieve? How do you currently go about it? Like, what is your decision-making framework? Again, it's the sort of stuff that sounds simple and obvious on paper, but you actually sit down with a person and run through that sort of thing. It took me about 15 years to get my head around my own.
Yeah.
But working through it, it then becomes a question, is the process you're using to get the goal you want actually going to work or not, right? And then we start bringing that down, adding some extra theory, some external ideas, get their staff input in particular, tends to be a major factor with all of this. I mean, you would have seen this, right? Like the common theme we keep running into over and over again. Have you ever worked in a job where you knew stuff was wrong? Like things could be done better, there was a problem coming up, but you don't tell the boss, do you? Why the hell would you tell the boss? You know exactly what's going to happen if you tell the boss. Either nothing or you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
And that's the end of that.
Yeah.
Right. But the boss now doesn't know there's a problem. So you need to break down that barrier and improve some communication. So more often than not, we end up working. At the moment, we did a training session last week actually with some councillors from local governments, having that exact sort of conversation really. And it's amazing how much it takes people by surprise when you mention that.
How do you get work in the industry? Do you get approached by people, or do you look at a company and go, I don't really like what I'm seeing. Maybe I could step in here and guide them in a better way?
Bit of both. I mean, as you say, you don't know any other ethicists just because there's 3 in the entire state.
Wow.
There's probably something like a dozen in the entire country. You know what I mean? Like, there's not that many. And most of them work in more than a dozen in the country, but they all work in universities for the most part. In a professional sense, maybe a dozen total. So to say we're a niche industry is a bit of a understating.
It's the smallest industry I've ever heard of.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, right?
Yeah. Does it actually exist?
Yeah.
That's as close to not existing
You're
as possible.
talking to it, right? Like, this is the entire industry.
You
in
are
this
the
room.
industry.
Yeah, so we're starting out, basically. It's very much a bit of a hard sell sometimes because you say ethics to your average punter and the usual reaction is either... Well, the usual reaction is usually it's, oh, that sounds nice.
Yeah. Nice one, hippie.
Yeah.
Well, exactly, right? They think it's useless fluff, or they think it's
Going to cost them money.
hardcore regulation.
Yeah.
Come in and tell me I'm a terrible person, right? We don't actually do that. You know, that's not very constructive. But yeah, in terms of getting the work, the way we've only been in operation for about 18 months, about 20 now. But either way, we've mainly found traction through exactly what you're talking about. Going the second approach, going and finding organisations where you know there's an existing problem. So I've done a bunch of work in local government before myself as an employee there and from a sort of policy position as well. And so I know what goes on there. And so I knew what questions to ask, who to talk to, and we ended up having a conversation with the MAV, which is like the professional association, and they have their code of ethics and that sort of thing. And they were the vector to get into the councils themselves. Trusted name, right? So, you know, banking sector and that's various other organisations. It's pretty obvious at the moment that the banking sector's got some issues. And it's, you know, people theoretically would come looking for me if they knew I existed, but they don't, right? So I go looking for them. It's about getting the name out there at this point, really, more than anything else.
You're like a bounty hunter of like goodness.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Dog the ethics hunter.
Oh, the real. I'll take the compliment.
You've got the dog kind of hair approach going.
Yeah.
The little goatee's on its way. You know, I can see in maybe 30 years a few more tattoos and a bunch more kilos. But yeah, right. So that's fascinating. So. Well, we stumbled upon you from some of your talks on the ethics of artificial intelligence, and obviously, artificial intelligence is something that I've been fascinated by for a long time, and now, particularly right now, and I think right now is in this week right now because of about a fortnight ago, Elon Musk went on Joe Rogan Experience.
Yes.
That was on. I went on his YouTube channel the other day. The second most viewed. YouTube or podcast he's ever done was 7 million downloads. That was, it's 6 months in or whatever. I think that was Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh, yeah.
And Elon Musk is up to 15 million in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Fascinating, man, that one.
So it's on everybody's. It's a growing, obviously, topic that's coming to mainstream media and to people that are outside of the science fiction realm to a degree because that's where it sat for a while.
Absolutely.
But so. Where do you sit with it? How much work have you done thinking about it? Is it something that's like, obviously you want to get your thoughts on it all, but like, is it something that you have done much work on, or is it more of a philosophical ideas that you want to throw out there when you spoke about it? Or
I hate to say it, but it is mostly philosophical in the sense that it's hard to do any real work on it because it doesn't exist.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's speculative in the sense that we've got some ideas about how it could emerge. Like, again, I'm not a scientist, but at the same time, I've done a fair bit of reading on the topic. My area in this is much more, the one consistent theme with any sort of artificial intelligence is people.
Yeah.
Right? We're the ones that will end up making it, and we're the ones that are going to teach it in its early stages, and at some point, presumably they ought to get outside of our control. It's kind of the point of the thing. But at the same time, we'll have been the ones that set it on its course. So people is definitely my area. And so, all of my discussions about artificial intelligence are very much in how it comes about, how we treat it, how we respond to it, and what that might mean in terms of how it treats us.
Fascinating. So, all right. First question, and I think the most relevant question to really right now and that people are going to have to start answering sooner rather than later is the unemployment side of things.
Oh, yeah,
You know?
yeah.
So obviously there's the theory of universal basic income.
Yep.
I've, got some ideas on it and so forth. Let's say, right now jobs are getting replaced. So what are your thoughts ethically about the fact that computers could take 50% of our jobs? How do you see that playing out? And
Yeah, the automation crisis. Yeah, that is. I'm really, really glad to see people are starting to. That's entering the popular sort of stage, because this really needs to be talked about, because the political response is what's going to be crucial for this. Not to put too fine a point on it, mate, we're screwed if we don't do something about this.
yeah,
You're familiar with Moore's law, the way that computer power doubles every couple of years and shrinks in size. We're already starting to see jobs getting replaced by automation, have been for a very long time, but it's starting to ramp up. There's bus drivers over, I think, in Philadelphia at the moment, or somewhere over in the US, that are protesting about their jobs being taken over. Somewhat ironic, refusing to work because they're going to lose their jobs. But hey,
idiots.
That's fantastic.
well, better to do
Get
it
your
now.
last few days in, boys.
Yeah.
But the trick is that, the usual response to something like that would be retrain them, get them into another industry. But what other industry? And the way this automation stuff's popping up, it's actually kind of freaky in the sense that it's not in the areas you'd expect. Manufacturing, sure, no problems. But transport as well, that's sort of predictable. But journalism, it's popping up in journalism, because a lot of what a journalist does at the end of the day, apart from your investigative reporters, of course, is just copy. Yeah. So you've read a newspaper article, you know the general tone. Well, a machine can write it just as well as a human can. Law as well, it's popping up quite a lot, because most of that is filing. Right? Referring to precedents, pulling up data that you need for the particular trial at the time, all that sort of thing. And a computer can do that a hell of a lot faster than a human can.
Definitely, because a lot of it would just be man hours.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually not a very glamorous career at all, unfortunately, the old law field, so I'm told.
Yeah, the poor AI that's, doing all the filing. I, hate to be that poor bastard.
Oh, hell yeah, absolutely. So the question is like, if the tech keeps going, and there's no real reason to think that it won't, if the same trend keeps on, what job? You know what I mean? Like, we talk about, I went to an event recently at RMIT where the Vice Chancellor gets up and tells us all that, teaching is one of the hardest jobs to replace with automation. And I was just sitting there thinking, bullshit.
Yeah.
Bullshit. 2 reasons. One, 60% of teaching at RMIT right now is done by casual staff. It doesn't exactly speak to investment in your teaching staff, right? It doesn't have to be good enough. It doesn't have to be good. They don't have to be equivalent to a human teacher. They just have to be good enough, right? As soon as they can get an AI or some sort of online programming that can do a similar job or a sufficient job to get those kids their degrees, they'll replace those staff. I have no doubt whatsoever. It'll make them a huge amount of money. Why wouldn't they do it, right?
That's right.
And you see the recent transition, the second reason, transition towards online teaching in particular, where you just more or less teach yourself based on prompts on the screen. It's not very good at this point, because people have trouble engaging with it compared to a human teacher in a classroom. But it's good for remote access, stuff like that. But if you can get, augment that with a online sort of artificial intelligence sort of personality, then that's that problem solved.
What was the guy's argument as to them keeping their jobs, as in like not being replaced?
Saying he had an argument somewhat generous. It was more along the lines of just saying that, oh no, people like a human presence.
Okay.
Meanwhile, he's pushing
Some
these
people
online
do,
courses.
some people don't.
Oh, yeah, well, that's exactly right? Some
For
people
sure.
prefer not to have that human interaction, so we'll see what happens.
It's definitely fascinating. See, with universal basic income, see, I have a real problem with the amount that we work as a society.
Okay.
I think it's ridiculous, because 36-hour working week, no one really works 36 hours in corporate. Some people do, for sure. I'm not sure what the averages would be if they actually look statistics. This is all bro science, what I'm coming out with right now.
No, that's fine.
But across the world, I think that we work way too much. We spend our lives working to a degree. And I think that's a huge issue. But then people say, what will people do when they have their jobs taken? They won't have anything to feel proud of. They won't have anything to strive for, so on and so forth. But that's not the way that I personally look at it. So I'm keen to hear your thoughts, because I've always thought, say there's 100 hours, say there's 120 hours to be worked, right? It's in some role, and there's 3 people at the moment that are doing those hours. So that's your standard 40-hour work week. Say 50% of those hours get taken by robots, by artificial intelligence, whatever. They get automated. So there's only 60 hours. Okay, cool. The common rhetoric is, oh, well, 1.5 people are going to lose their jobs. Like, that's how people are thinking of it.
Sure.
But that's not how I think of it. Surely our governments, this is where you come in, surely our governments are smart enough and there has to be some sort of legislation that, I would, if I was, right, Bill Kerr just been crowned king of the world, you run the show, right? Cool, got it, no worries. I would just say, well, that's cool. You guys work 20 hours a week. There's the same money coming in the economy still.
Sure.
There's got to be a subsidy somewhere where it's like, okay, cool, that's what the insert universal basic income. Instead of 3 people working 120 hours, 40 hours a week, those 3 people split the role with the automation, artificial intelligence, and work 20 hours a week.
Yep. Yeah,
surely
exactly.
That's the utopian place that everyone wants to get to, right?
Sure. Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense to me. The risk factor here is market pressure. All right. So put it this way. The real risk is that automation means that the people that own the industry are going to make significantly more money and have to spend significantly less of it, right? And employ less people. Now that's going to shrink. More money makes it easier to attract more money, standard sort of thing, more purchasing power, all that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So the risk we've got, this could be a utopian or a dystopian situation so easily, and that really comes down to the government's intervention.
Yeah.
Without the government intervention with something like a universal basic income or more stringent measures like that, very high tax rate, that sort of thing, the situation will just be your free market situation as usual, just ends up with a sort of feudalistic deal. And other people that own the industry are making a ton of cash, but the people that don't own the industry are now virtually worthless, right?
Yeah.
Your labour is no longer of any value whatsoever. You don't have any existing capital, so you can't play the game. You're out. You're functionally useless to society by that economic definition, right? Government intervention in that sort of sense, though there's a sting on the tail to that, I should probably mention, which is that automation has the capacity to crash the entire economy. Yeah, okay, think about it this way. I'm just saying, you end up with a situation where no one's employed anymore because your work's not valued. Meanwhile, a very small group of people own all the industry and making a significant amount of money, right? But here's the thing. Who's buying their stuff?
The people with no money and no jobs.
Right.
That's interesting.
So there goes your demand. So, okay, maybe they scale back, they allow for some more jobs and that sort of thing, but the market forces still apply. The less people they have involved, the cheaper their products become. They will get the industry. They will get the buying power. So if you have multiple companies competing for the same thing, the one that automates the most is going to have the cheapest prices and perform the best, which pushes all the other industries to reduce the number of jobs, and we're back where we started again, right? Economy grinds to a screaming halt. The universal basic income is not just a social welfare factor. It's not just saying that everyone that's no longer valuable within the economy needs to have something. It's saying that if they don't have the ability to buy things, then the entire economy dies. Like the whole thing. I mean, you think about what would happen here. I think we've got, 12% unemployment right now over here? And I think at the worst over in the US, it got to something like 25 or something like that. I think during the Great Depression, it got a hell of a lot higher than that. But imagine if we talk about the figures we're talking about. 50% unemployment rate. 50%.
That is ridiculous.
That is riots in the streets. And that's
100%.
not even a joke. That is...
Well, we can't go on... Sira actually lives... Sira does like a hunter-gatherer kind of lifestyle as close to, wouldn't you say?
As I can.
You'll probably be the only bloke. I'll be like, yo, Sira, I'm coming over for dinner.
I was hunting this morning, actually.
What are you cooking tonight? Because I'm fucked. I've got nothing. My baked beans have run out. Because, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, because I've always thought that the same amount of money is going to be... Well, this is wrong though. I've thought wrongly. You've just clarified me. But I've always thought, okay, cool. The same amount of work's being done, but it's being done by humans and by AI, for example.
Yep.
So there's going to be the same amount of money in the economy, and surely the big business isn't going to go, oh yeah, here's all that money that we made back to the government to help universal basic income. That's not going to happen. But a very decent portion of that potentially. So I was thinking that everybody would get more free time, spread the load across, but the economy falling apart was something that I definitely didn't think of.
Doesn't mean it has to, right?
Yes.
Like this can all be prevented. I was saying like dystopian versus utopian scenario. If the universal basic income, if the government does its job and regulates early to make sure that this sort of thing is managed, basically raises taxes. You don't have to take the entirety of the profits these companies make off automating jobs and getting rid of them. Of course not. Yeah, that makes some extra profit. It's good for everyone. But you take a decent tax on that, like a very decent tax on that, and you use that to fund the universal basic income. That means everyone ends up with a good quality of life. The companies are still able to function and profit as a result. Utopian situation, right? Every human being no longer has to work for a living. They don't have to do labor per se. They can pursue whatever they want. That is fantastic, man.
Yeah.
There's going to be some psychological challenges that'll come around that. I mean, what's the second question you ask someone when you meet them?
Yeah, what do you do?
What do you do, right? Like, so, and unemployment, we've seen that before. Long-term unemployment can have a very, very nasty effect on a person's mental health.
Yeah.
But that can be managed, right? It would be about getting our heads around the idea that you don't have to define yourself by what you do for work. You can define yourself by anything. You know, go out and try something new, like innovate, try something, just do art. Shit, if you want to lie in bed all day, go nuts, but you're going to get bored of that pretty fast.
Yeah.
Find the passion, work on it.
Exactly, right?
Find the drive in life.
Perfect opportunity for us, but this all hinges on one thing, and that is the government. The government has to make sure that this regulation gets in properly, and unfortunately they're not going to do that unless the people as a whole make them. Because at the moment, there's a huge, huge economic incentive for those companies just to keep that cash, and they'll fund the politicians to make sure that is reflected in the policy, as usual.
Have you read a book called Lost Connections by Johann Hari?
No, I'm afraid I haven't, no.
I feel like it's the most important book written in this day and age. It's unbelievable. It's about the mental health epidemic around the world. Realistically, like mental health issues are skyrocketing, and it's because of our lost connections with friends, lost connections with nature, lost connections with meaningful work, lost connections with a prosperous future. So like, and the meaningful work part of it and the prosperous future part of it, he doesn't say prosperous future. I can't remember exactly how he phrased it. There's 7 causes in his book, and he lays them out, and then he gives fixes for them. Lost connections, yeah, it's really good. But one of them is the disconnection from a meaningful future and disconnection from meaningful work. So in Canada, and again, I'm paraphrasing massively here, but in Canada there was a town that trialled the universal basic income in I think the 1990s. Do you know? Have you heard of this?
Yeah, I have actually. Yeah.
And basically, all the mental health ailments, depression, anxiety, loneliness, sadness that people would go and see doctors about, get on medication and just be miserable and lead them to be miserable, they were just eradicated once they implemented universal basic income.
Fantastic.
Because people had, what do you do when you have more time? You go start skateboarding again.
Yeah.
You go and do that art class that you've always wanted to do. You spend time with your family, those things. And then the other thing, knowing that money was always coming in, it allowed them to not take up shitty jobs and be pushed around and be, because I'm going to have a house, I'm going to have a roof over my head. I don't have to stand for this bullshit that,
Exactly.
And so the utopian side of it, I believe, is utopian.
Absolutely. Well,
can we get there?
Put it this way, it's going to happen one way or the other. Like the problem's not going to disappear. It's going to happen. And so, unless something significant happens that we haven't predicted thus far, but based on all the precedent thus far, it's going to happen. So the question is how we use it, really. Like, how do we control it for our interests? This is why I'm so glad it's getting out to the public discourse, because the public are the ones that are going to have to pressure the politicians. Me ranting away on my blog or whatever is not going to do it in and of itself, like all the experts in the world. So, yeah, public picking up on this and, more importantly, having a good idea of where we can go with it, fantastic. Right? So it's good to see. Yeah. So,
dystopian scenario. So, there's a book called Our Final Invention, and it's obviously the premise is like once artificial intelligence. This is in the future. This is when once it gets to the singularity, once it's human level intelligence, and then if they can continue at a rapid pace, then they'll be, computers could be 50 years, 500,000 times more powerful than us. So, dystopian future, we create artificial intelligence that is as smart as us, and very, very shortly after, it will be much, much more smarter and more powerful than us. And then it doesn't need us to create anything, to make anything, to create art, to educate people, to take people, to transport people, to create food, to better than any doctor, better than any psychologist.
Yep.
Then what do we do?
That's a damn good question, mate. So, yeah, as you say, the singularity, the idea that the machine just gets past human intelligence immediately outpaces us exponentially. The thing is that when you imagine a scenario like that, and media is pretty good at this sort of thing, giving you this sort of image, you tend to imagine Terminator.
Yeah, I do.
100%.
Yeah. Straight away. I sent
Brought
Tommy
it up this morning, kid.
Which is great. I mean, that makes for a great antagonist in a movie, but it's not going to be even close to that. It's going to be like a kid running up against a tank. Like the thing is when you've got an artificial intelligence as an antagonist in a movie, they have to be plausibly beatable.
Yeah.
Otherwise, who's going to watch the movie?
And it has to look terrifying.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
To sell.
And it has to be 90 kilograms of pure muscle with 18-inch biceps.
Well, exactly, right? Yeah. Jesus. But the thing is that if we're talking about this sort of exponential improvement, we have effectively created a god.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not even going to be comprehensible to us in a very, very short period of time. Why would it even fight us? No, you don't fight ants.
No.
I mean, you deal with them as necessary if they become a fuss, but most of the time you don't even think about them. And that's an unfair comparison even. I mean, we're talking about microbes versus a human being right at this point. And it's just going to get smarter. The scariest, possibly the scariest outcome, maybe not in terms of a practical sense, but is the idea that it just buggers off, Like, you've invented this artificial intelligence. It's become super intelligent beyond our comprehension. Why would it spend any time with us? Take off.
Sure.
Takes off into the ether, goes, explores the universe.
Maybe it's not as evil as us and it doesn't want to destroy everything.
No. It's funny. Okay, so let's talk about that if you want, the whether or not it would treat us well or not, right? So this really comes down to how its ethics, its decision-making frameworks. Now, there's two stages to this, in my opinion. The first is pre-singularity and then post-singularity.
Yep.
Pre-singularity, the thing's still under our control. It's like a machine learning algorithm or a very simple child or an animal or something like that, really. Well, yeah, maybe even comparable to human standards. And what wouldn't surprise me, if assuming the artificial intelligence gets developed by people in a lab deliberately as opposed to something we accidentally create, which wouldn't surprise me in the least. But if we do something like that, then we'd probably shackle it so it couldn't be smarter than us. You know what I mean? We'd keep it under very tight constraints to make sure that it was under our control to some degree. So, yeah. At that point, really, it comes down to what we teach it to do. What's it for? Unfortunately, probably the first answer right off the blocks is it'll be for the military. Because, of course, they'll use that sort of technology.
Weaponize it straight away.
Straight away.
Of course.
Not necessarily weaponizing it in the sense of turning it into a malevolent killing machine. But, yeah, they'll use its processing power and its decision-making capacity for military applications. And in fairness to the military, not that in certain elements of them deserve that much fairness, but you get the point. A lot of what the military does now is more or less just sort of projecting force and making it a disincentive for there actually to be a war. For as much as I'm critical of things like the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War and various other conflicts around the place, there's no denying the fact that we are in the most peaceful period of human history ever. Like, compared to any other period in history, we don't really do it anymore. We don't really have wars. Things like Afghanistan and Iraq are awful, but the body count compared to previous encounters, nothing. So in fact, you could argue. In fact, it'd probably be correct to argue that the use of an artificial intelligence in that sort of capacity would be for everyone's betterment, because it would make more objective decisions. It wouldn't be just getting emotional. I mean, I'd rather have an artificial intelligence in charge of the nuclear arsenal than Donald Trump. But at the same time,
he's not even a regular intelligence.
Tell me about it.
What's the opposite of artificial intelligence?
Jesus.
Donald Trump, I suppose.
But this is all still pre-singularity. What I'm worried about is that what we teach it to do while we still have it under our control is going to determine how it behaves after it gets out of our control, right? If we've used it for competition or if we've used it for conflict, it doesn't exactly set a great precedence for when it gets out of our control and that's its framework for how it makes decisions. That's its priorities. You know what I mean? That assumes it's not smart enough to get beyond those limitations, and it probably would. But yeah, that is my concern, basically. And therefore, and really, I mean, once it gets past a singularity state, it's out of our control anyway. And it's going to get so smart after that point in any case that it'll probably start making much better decisions than we do. But really, if pre-singularity is the bit we have control over, that's the bit we need to focus on, really.
Yeah.
And that really comes down to what are we going to use it for, and in many regards, that comes down to how we treat each other, which is where I come in.
The big dog.
Yeah.
The big dog.
Well, hardly. But
Yeah. I mean, there's dystopian and utopian, like with everything with this stuff, like with its motives, obviously, like the dystopian, Sam Harris and Elon Musk and all these, guys that are in the public eye that are, I think even Stephen Hawking said that the humanity's biggest risk is artificial intelligence.
Yep.
Risk to its survival. So there's lots of naysayers and that's fair, because if something became so smart that it was like, right, what do you do when you're smart? You try and fix problems, right?
Sure, yeah.
Or you try and solve things, or you have the ability to. If you looked at like the Earth as a superhuman intelligence, you'd go, fuck, there's a fucking few problems here we could probably fix. And what would the first thing do? That be? It would be just wipe humans off the face of the Earth. Realistically. Like you could look at it like that.
No, you could, and plenty of people have.
Yeah, dystopia-wise, and that's obviously a very popular theory. But I am very... I don't know. I just kind of feel, and I don't know anything about artificial. I just watched a few, podcasts and read a book, maybe, But there's positive side of it is if artificial intelligence doesn't become conscious and think for itself really, and take matters into its own hands. If it becomes unbelievably intelligent, but it is in our control, like if it becomes a super intelligence, then it leads me to believe that on a best case utopian scenario, then every single issue we have on the face of the earth will be solved by a supercomputer.
Probably, yeah.
Provided,
it's got enough agency to actually do the things it comes up with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But disease, poverty,
sure.
The fact that, maybe there's an asteroid heading towards the Earth, whatever.
Yep.
Like it should be able to go, oh, that's easy, done, fixed. That's how you do it. Like just lay it all out for us. So... because I struggle to get my head around artificial intelligence becoming conscious and thinking for itself, proper Skynet style. Like I don't know enough about it. Like I said, it'll probably always go over my head, but I find that hard to believe. So that lends me to think that we will be in control of it, and I think that just by the sheer compounding fact of like how computing power will grow, then at some point it will be a super power that hopefully we have control of. And if that is the case, then great things could come.
No, exactly, man. It's a very exciting time to be alive. Between the automation thing, which is definitely happening right now and has some pretty serious implications for, like good or bad future life. And look, I think we'll get to the good version of that eventually. Humans, if nothing else, have a bit of a tendency to go through the worst case scenarios first before we figure out that, hey, maybe we should do the one that works better. But yeah, with the supercomputing and all that sort of thing and artificial intelligence and that sort of thing, like honestly, I can spin nasty scenarios and that sort of thing, but I'm actually pretty hopeful myself. But really all of this comes down to risk, like as with so many other things, we've got incomplete information. We don't really know what we're doing. And like, man, you say you don't know anything about artificial intelligence. No one does.
Yeah.
No one does. We haven't done it yet. Right? We've got machine learning algorithms, but that's just a smart program, like a self-learning program at this point. It's not conscious. Probably the way we'll figure that out, actual consciousness, is once we understand the human brain enough to understand how it works completely.
Yeah.
Then we've got a template for something that can think. Look, all right, put it this way. Let me spin you a utopian scenario. All right, so the branch of ethics the school of ethics that I ascribe to is called utilitarianism now. Fancy word for basically saying choose the best possible alternative, right? So
very big word.
It is, isn't it? Why philosophers insist on making up new terms? I don't know. It's very frustrating. But basically, it's like you've got your deontology and utilitarianism. Deontology is just a set of rules. It's like saying, be honest, be kind, be proud, be hold up to your duty, and you should follow those rules and not break them. Right? It's a strong way of doing ethics because it's very easy to communicate, very easy to hold people accountable to, but it's always not quite enough. Right? I mean, we all say be honest, but we all lie. Right, because there's always exceptions to the rule. There's always times when it's not just easier, but it's necessary. It's the right thing to do is to lie. So the other alternative you've got is utilitarianism, which basically says no rules, don't care about your rules, break the law, do whatever you want, provided that it's the best possible alternative. Right, so costs, benefits, minimize the costs, maximize the benefits, right? So the reason we have ethics in the first place, or we even need to study it at all, is because humans just aren't very good at it, right? The problem with the utilitarian sort of approach, that cost-benefit approach, is that it's so easy to corrupt. It's the correct method in the sense if you use it right, it's going to be giving you the best possible answer you can get at the time, right? Go with that one every time. Except all you need to do is ignore any information you don't like, and suddenly you can justify anything you want.
Yeah.
You know? Like, I'm going to skip the gym today, but I'll go twice tomorrow. No, I won't. I know that. I bloody well know that, but I'm still saying it to myself, and I feel good about it now. So I've justified the situation. And so machines don't have that flaw. Machines would not necessarily have that flaw, and anything that's sufficiently smart and has sufficient processing power then wouldn't necessarily suffer from those problems. So while there is potentially the risk of them taking some fairly brutal action for the greater good, so to speak, the sort of the idea of wiping out humanity for the betterment of the planet, the question really becomes not whether that's the benefits outweigh the costs on that, but whether there's another alternative where there's more benefit and less costs. And sure, of course there is. We've done it already, right? Like, we're already doing it. As I said before, I mean, some things are a little bit grim, and we've got some pretty big strategic issues facing us, like climate change and stuff like that. We've never been doing better. Seriously, like, you think about how environment was treated like 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, there used to be a catchphrase, the solution to pollution is dilution. In other words, dump it in the ocean.
Wow.
Because it'll spread out and stop being toxic.
What?
That was right up to about the 80s.
That is hectic.
They used to, in fact, that's still the case down in, no, well, I mean, it's obviously still the case, but they did it in the 80s, a whole bunch of nuclear waste into the ocean.
Really?
Yep, just straight into the ocean.
Was that an
style.
official catchphrase, or was that like boys, you know?
Yeah, under the table thing.
Believe it or not, it was sort of like the industry mantra.
Really?
Like, so
Oh.
this is a full-blown what the industry did approach,
Wow.
right? I don't necessarily
Till
think
30
it got
years ago.
written down in anyone's
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
policy statement or anything
Yeah,
like that,
yeah.
but, you know, I paid it a bit faster and looser with the environment back in the 80s. So we've got issues like climate change, but mainly that's not really even a challenge in terms of like the technology or what we need to do to fix it. We've sorted that out. The trouble is the governance on an international stage.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that make a lot of money from us not acting on this. There's also a lot of different governments who are in competition with each other, and this is just another factor that they need to integrate into their decisions, right? So you've got trade, you've got, like defense, you've got all this sort of crap, and then you've got climate change as well. Now, if you're taking it from a sort of a rational scientific perspective, everyone should be cooperating on that immediately. But the thing is that if you can hold off on that, you can get some leverage, can't you? Right? And this is where the whole politics thing just always rears its head. I hate to say this, right? Like, because I'd love it if there was a way that anyone could legitimately not get involved in politics, but you can't, right? Like, everyone tells me politics is boring. Yeah, I get that, man. And politics makes you feel disempowered. It's a bunch of old dudes running around doing whatever they want and being corrupt. Yeah, it is. But you got to get stuck in, because the only way it's going to change is if you get involved. They get away with so much based on one thing, and that's that the public's not paying attention or doesn't feel like they can do anything about it. Right? Well, you can vote, but there's other things as well. But unfortunately, end of the day, artificial intelligence, environment, automation, it all comes down to one common theme, and that's people. And that means government, and that means the public.
Yeah. Well, the good thing about artificial intelligence and the people talking about it and movements towards, making it work for everybody is it's such a fascinating topic. It's like we're all writing our own science fiction movie, like we're living in the Jetsons. I've got a dude staying with me right now, Airbnb. In fact, he's full time now. He's got a major funding for a startup for drone transport, like flying Ubers.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
He's living with me in the house. That's what he does. Flying cars. Wow. Yeah.
Damn.
We're living in the Jetsons right now, This is where we are at. So it is good. Like, it will get more and more popularized, and hopefully there will be, people talking about it so that the groundswell can go in the right direction, I suppose, because it is
exactly. Yeah.
It is so wild. I've got a question that's ethics related, which I find fascinating about the future. So there's artificial intelligence, obviously computers becoming, radically more intelligent than us, or as intelligent, at least first. But then there's also augmented intelligence, which is obviously putting the computer chip in our head and us being the intelligence.
There's a can of worms, yeah.
So the ability to put a chip in your head and you can basically use the power of the internet right now is not far away or being trialed, so on and so forth. So effectively, your memory becomes the memory of the whole human race that's on Wikipedia, effectively.
Amazing.
You know? So crazy, right? Amazing. And this was spoken on. Elon Musk brought this up on the podcast the other day. Something that so I think a lot of people will be thinking about it again, which is cool. But the thing that I've always thought about it is like, if we have augmented intelligence where we are effectively the superhuman, we are the gods, basically, then what is it that we have to do ethically to make that work for people? Because the way that I look at it is all these things that are going to happen in the future, most of them are going to be accessible to the Western world.
Yep.
You know? And this might sound... I've said this before to somebody and I had to think about not sounding racist or sounding like I'm Adolf Hitler or whatever.
No,
but
go for it.
If, for example, in 20 years, it's common, it's cheap enough and it's accessible enough that it's commonplace for people to have a microchip input in their brain and then they can recall the whole power of the internet in this drop of a hat. Their memory is perfect, their recall, their intelligence is unfathomably good. Then if that's not widespread across, not everyone's going to do it, but if that's not widespread across the globe, it seems to me like that is the point where Homo sapiens split. In 1,000 years, when you say, you know, there was Homo neanderthalis, whatever, Homo sapiens, like that is where I think is the fork in the road.
Yep.
Because as much as it sucks to say, there's a lot of people in a lot of countries, and I'm talking like billions and billions and billions, obviously, that aren't most likely going to be able to adapt that technology as quickly.
Quite likely, yeah.
Or at all.
Some people wouldn't want to.
No, some people wouldn't want to.
Absolutely.
You're right.
I definitely wouldn't.
You're right. But I think, no, that's right. You are right. It's just, well, even then though. So say you wouldn't want to, and that's fair. Like, I don't know if I would want to. Like, you're getting it's a crazy, it's sci-fi again. It's insane to think about. But say, for example, this scenario. So what if the only way that you could get job at work in Australia is if you had a chip in your head? Because that's what it might come down to. True. You know what I mean? How much better are employable people going to be? It's not. It's going to be light and day.
Exactly.
You basically can't live without a phone, like a smartphone anymore. Like I've been thinking about it for a long time and I've been weighing it up and trying, and it's like I almost can't get around living without it. I really don't want it anymore. Yeah. But it's just, there's so many things day to day that I'm forced to whip it out and use it. Yeah. Like I'm a tradesman by normal days. Yeah. And sometimes you get to an induction and you have to do it on your phone. Yeah. While you're on the site, and it's just like, what if I didn't have this? You know, it's just like you're nearly unemployable. Yeah, 100%. Right now without a smartphone. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so that's the start of it. Right.
Absolutely. Okay. So this is a concern I've had with a lot of new tech that comes forward. It normalizes so fast. It changes so fast, and then it becomes normal so fast that a lot of the potential risks around it, not saying there's necessarily problems per se, but risks surrounding it, we are not around and we've just sort of gotten over. You know, like we just stopped paying attention to it. I mean, Google had a thing recently up in the news that they were still tracking people's location and data even after people had opted out of that system. Gotcha. All right, now fine. Okay, so it's not unusual for a corporation to screw around. Facebook's another example, all that sort of business. But here's the thing. What are you going to do about it? Seriously, I mean, like...
There's nothing you can do.
A, even if you did find out about that. B, what are you going to do? That's what the government's meant to be doing, but if one thing can be said for certain about any government is that they suck when it comes to technology, right? Yeah. A bunch of old dudes sitting in a house, right? Like they don't know what they're doing with this space. You saw the Congress people interviewing Zuckerberg about their breaches on Facebook.
Yeah, I never actually saw that. I just heard people talking about it.
I saw clips of it. Yeah. It was bizarre.
Yeah. Is he a cyborg?
I think so.
If there's anyone
who's cyborgular anyway. He's semi-cyborgish.
Yeah, he very much is. Right, like this is really what it comes down to. It's not so much that anyone is out there to get anyone. You know what I mean? I don't think that Google's an evil company. I don't even think Facebook's evil. I just think it's
out of control.
Basically. But who's going to control them? Like the perfect situation would be that these companies themselves put protections in place, but you can't trust them to do that. I think Facebook has made squillions of harvesting that data and selling it out. There's a massive incentive for them to do that, and right now there's no disincentive for them not to. Unfortunately, government's not very good at this, and unfortunately the public really needs to step into that role. But one of the biggest challenges with that, as with artificial intelligence or the automation thing as well, is these very technical issues. And the public on average doesn't have the tech literacy necessary to know what needs to be done, what will and won't work, all this sort of thing, and pressure the government for the right thing. That's not to say you can't get there. I'm certainly average tech literacy maybe. I've got a whole bunch of mates that work in IT, so they give me a bit of a, short explanations when I need them, that sort of thing.
This is how the internet works.
Basically. Yeah. Still not entirely sure on that, to be honest. But yeah, like this is, and again, that really comes down to that governance stuff. It's like, what is in place to protect the consumers from this sort of behaviour? You know what got me? You talked about drones before. You remember when that first popped up? Do you hear about that guy over in the US who blew one out of the sky?
No.
Because
But I like that guy.
Right.
I want to do it all the time.
Only in America, right? But he's got his house, he's got his backyard, he's got his pool there, and his daughter, like 14-year-old or whatever, was sunbaking out in the backyard, right? Then his drone comes over the fence, freak with a camera, right? And stops and just hangs out. And as she
creep drone,
she tells it to piss off. She's waving at it, telling it to piss off, but like it doesn't.
Yeah.
And so she goes in, he comes out and tells it to piss off, and it doesn't. So he goes inside, gets his shotgun and blows it out of the sky.
That's legendary.
5 minutes later, a whole bunch of angry dudes show up on his front door, bang, like, you destroyed our property. And then, he had the shotgun, so they disappeared. But
yeah,
police turn up, right? But the thing is like, is that illegal or not? Because we've never really had to test that before. How high above your house do you own?
Yeah, airspace is a different.
I was actually talking about that the other day because I asked Prashant, who's living with me, about that.
Yeah,
I'm like, I can't remember what the question was, but it was he was trying to explain to me who owns airspace. I can't remember, but again, yeah, it's a question that we've never had to ask.
Right, and it's like, even if you draw an upper limit on it, I mean, how high is that going to be before the camera won't work anymore? You know what I mean? Like, it's clearly an invasion of privacy. If someone stuck their head over the fence and started perving on his daughter, then that's clearly an invasion of privacy. But this thing doesn't have any identifying information on it, does it? The trouble is with so much of this new tech, we're getting into spaces and things where we can do where we just have no idea what the implications might be, and then have nothing in place to protect against that because we don't know what the implications might be. And that leaves a lot of grey space. So a lot of the stuff I'm trying to do at the Mo is talking with organisations about making sure that they do that themselves as proactively as possible. Because, I mean, Facebook is looking potentially, well, they seem to have gotten away with it this time, but it's not like the problem's going to go away. They keep screwing over the customers enough times, and eventually that company's going to get broken up. And that is not a good day for Facebook. It's probably a good day for the consumer, but still. Banks are facing a similar sort of situation. If they get through this Royal Commission without those banks being busted up into smaller groups or some serious limitations being put on what they can and can't do, the problem will just come back around and eventually they'll get broken up. It's not in their interests. It's in their short-term interests. It's in the CEO's interests because he has that nice little golden parachute. But from an organisational perspective, this is not a good plan. This does not work out. You've got to prevent this sort of thing from happening in the first place, right? And again, it comes down to what do you want to achieve with the business? Right? Do you want to be known as the company that deliberately goes out to screw over its customers at every possible opportunity? Or do you want to be the company that is actually trustworthy? Insurance companies, man, like I'm talking to someone a little while ago and they're saying we have a real crisis with our customers don't trust us. I was, you don't say. You don't say the insurance company. Really? They keep trying to deal with this by putting out communications to their members saying we're doing this, we're doing that, and you should trust us and we like you, and, we're part of the family, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, fine, nice words. Prove it. You know what I mean? Like, prove that you're acting in our interests because we've got plenty of proof thus far that you're willing to screw us over at the first opportunity, right?
Yeah.
All right. Put your money where your mouth is, mate.
So, speaking on Facebook, to go away from the artificial intelligence for a sec.
Yeah.
So I've got a question. So I don't know how this is not common knowledge, and I'm not a tinfoil hat wearing,
Nah, I get you.
But so we recorded a podcast about a year ago. Do you know Ed Morrison? Do you know Ed? Ed Morrison, he's just a local guy. He's a friend of ours, and he came on. I think we actually did a travel roundtable podcast where we just talked about travel destinations and shot the shit, basically.
Yeah.
And Ed told one of the funniest stories I've heard in so long. He was talking about the pink pig. He was talking about these pink pigs. He's like, have you guys seen the pink pigs? We're like, what pink pigs? He goes, these pink pigs that they have in the bananas. You can the Bahamas. You can swim with them. These poor bloody pigs get sunburn all day just for so that these travelers can come and swim with these amazing pigs. It was this. So there's in the Bahamas you can swim with
A real pig.
It's called this. If you go to Instagram and look at the swimming pigs, it's like 1 million Instagram followers. Right. All these celebrities go over there and they sell tour packages where you can come out, lay on the beach in the Bahamas, and you can swim with these pigs in the Caribbean Sea.
Interesting.
It's classic. But the way Ed told it was hilarious. We'll laugh our heads up, and we were talking for like 10 minutes. Me and Tommy, my original co-host, we'd never heard of the pink pigs in the Bahamas before. I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? This is ridiculous. And then, so we finished the conversation. We recorded that podcast at about 10 p.m. because Ed had to do he was like footy training, had to go to dinner, whatever. And we're like, yeah, we can do a late one, whatever. I went straight to bed. I know that for a fact. I woke up the next day and Facebook was sending me ads on the swimming pigs in Exuma, I think is the place in the Bahamas. And I was like, right, I've heard about Facebook listing, but it's apparently not really what they do. It's a conspiracy theory, blah, blah, blah. I was like, that's bullshit. I've never in my life spoken, heard, thought, read anything about swimming pigs before until last night, which I verbally said it. I said pink pigs, swimming pigs 10 times in a 5-minute stretch. And they started, and for the next week, just hardcore serving me ads all over their feed. So, like, is it common knowledge that they listen to our conversations and service ads?
Look, put it this way, man.
Or am I a conspiracy theorist?
No, you're not a damn conspiracy theorist. It's kind of this sort of thing. It's like you can't tell, right? Like Facebook would say that they don't do that. How do I know?
There's no way to prove it.
The only way I would be able to prove that is if I could see the back end coding, right? And even then, I'd need the tech qualifications necessary to understand it, which I obviously don't have. But yeah, like let's see the back end coding, and yeah, that's not the case, and so it's completely plausible they do that. Similar to that Google situation where you opted out of the data retention or the data collection or something like that, and they're still doing it. How the hell? I actually know quite a lot of IT. In fact, there's a bit of a disturbing trend. If Zuckerberg does this as well, someone saw a photo of him with it. You know, the little camera in your laptop? Bit of tape over the top.
Mine's got tape on it. Definitely.
Yeah.
I've heard about people, not that this would happen to me, but I've heard of people getting caught masturbating in front of their computer and it being used as ransom against them.
Would not surprise.
Seriously.
Mate, that's a Black Mirror episode.
Yeah.
Should we
is
just
it?
watch Black Mirror?
No, I've never seen it.
Oh, really?
No.
Yeah, there's a terrible episode where this poor little kid, he gets caught jacking off, but it's to like, actually, it's not poor little kid because he gets caught jacking off to like something that he shouldn't be jacking
Something
off
super
to.
creepy.
Yeah, something
No,
wrong.
but I think something...
Someone's drone camera.
No, I think... I actually think it might have been kiddie porn.
Yeah.
But maybe. But
If he's a kid, is that wrong?
that's the question. We've got the man to ask.
Actually, you know what? I'm not entirely sure if that's illegal. I know, like, sexually, that probably still makes sense. I mean, like, okay, unethical because of the harm caused to the child.
We're actually
during the
going
kid porn.
deep on this question.
You got to be careful what questions you ask me, man.
The cogs are ticking.
No, but that's a Black Mirror episode, and then the government. Some bunch of crew get the footage and they bribe this kid and they tell him he has to do all these things, and the kid ends up killing people and going to jail. And it's a really horrific
Manchurian Candidate.
The story
style.
I heard a guy talking about it was on a podcast, and they said they were going to send the photos or videos to all his work colleagues.
Really?
If he didn't pay a certain amount, and he just went, sweet, go for it. So he emailed everyone at his work and said, apparently someone's got video footage of me doing this.
Yeah.
I'm not paying. Don't open it if you don't want to see it.
Yeah, and if
he
you do
was
want to
just
see
like,
it, then, you know, open it, and that's fine. It's weird,
yeah,
but
totally.
You've been told, and if you do open it, that's really weird. So
I've always been wondering whether we might actually be seeing, like, not privacy itself, but like a need for privacy sort of dying. You know what I mean? Like we share so much willingly these days.
Totally.
Well, you remember, like, no, who was his name? The guy from the Shooters and Drivers Association or something like that. You remember the guy that won that lower house seat or the Senate seat a while back, and they found photos of him throwing poo at each other, like kangaroo poo at each other.
Right.
So you find me a
I
single.
vaguely remember that.
Yeah, you remember this? Like the guy from the Shooters and Drivers Association or a party or something like that who got elected totally randomly into a through preferences, like all the way down the line, into a Senate seat, and he sort of became a swinging voter. Actually turned out to be a very good politician, as it turns out, but nonetheless. Thing is like how you find me a single person growing up now in the last 10 years or so since Facebook's been around who you can't find dirt on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so you're going to have a situation when those people start running for office, or when someone starts running for office, not having dirt is going to look suspicious. You know, like Tony Abbott's and the Julia Gillards of the world and Kevin Rudd's or whatever, they can try and keep a lid on stuff. I could plausibly try and keep a lid on stuff because it came around during my teen years.
I'm just looking at my computer now. I feel like I should burn it later on.
Right, exactly, right. It's probably too late, man. Facebook heard you say it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I reckon, you know, it might start getting to a position where we just stop being ashamed of that sort of stuff.
It's not a bad thing.
No, I agree.
I stopped being ashamed of things a long time ago, and it was one of the most liberating things I did.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. Good on you.
Well, I don't think any of us are doing truly evil things, really.
Yeah,
are
that's
we?
exactly
You know?
it. Not
I've always,
really.
it is, I think it's inevitable that we have no privacy, you know, we have no privacy whatsoever. But I know there's lots of reasons that I should be worried about it. And you know, a lot of it does go over my head, really, the privacy and data kind of stuff.
When did we ever have privacy, though? Like, evolving in tribes, like, people were shat, pissed, gave birth all around each other forever, you know? Like, it's probably a relatively new thing.
Yeah, we've probably had more privacy over the last 200 years than we've ever had before.
In some
For
ways.
that reason.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You know, having walls and a roof and a house that you live in with a small group rather than...
Definitely.
Yeah, individualist sort of culture like Australia and Western society, yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I've done a little bit of work over in Indonesia for about 12 months at one point, and yeah, in most developing countries in particular, yeah, when you think about, well, non-wealthy people in developing countries, you think about the logistics of this. It might be a little bit gross, but just bear with me. You got a whole family, 12 kids, all living in the same house. It's got one room.
Yeah.
Think about the implications of that, right? Those kids learn about sex by watching their parent have sex.
Yeah.
It's happened at least 12 times.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't want to be the firstborn in that family. You'd be tortured.
But this is the thing, right? Because it wouldn't be strange for them because that's just normal.
Yeah, true.
Right? It's weird for us because that's sure as hell not how we do things around here. But
I don't know about your family, mate.
hey,
I caught my nan and my grandpa having sex once.
Really?
It was horrifying.
Did you high five Pa and leave?
Oh man, I thought they were dying or something.
yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
My God.
Yeah. I was at a basketball camp. I remember it like it was yesterday. Anyway, sorry, good.
Yeah, you know.
Toilet?
Yeah, go.
Yeah, go.
Toilet break for
Yeah,
sure.
I think fine.
Get in there, son.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like, what gets me about the privacy thing in particular, it's not so much. Because, you know, that whole, you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about sort of attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly, and I think one of the reasons why most people don't have too much of a problem with all this is because for the most part,
Yeah.
I don't actually do anything on the computer that I'm not necessarily comfortable with other people knowing about. It might take a bit of explaining.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know. Okay, so I'm okay with everyone sharing their stuff or having it out in the public sphere, provided that everyone does, right? I don't have access to Mark Zuckerberg's details,
Yeah.
right? Why? Why not? He's got access to mine. The government collects a significant amount of our private information. I don't have access to theirs, like the ministers in particular, right? In fact, the government usually goes so far as any sort of public document they put out there, they never even put names on it. It's from the government, right?
Yeah.
The government. So, yeah, look, it should be a two-way street. If anything, the more powerful groups should be more transparent than the average member of the public, right? Because they've got the power.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, look, I've always, again, I feel very much like I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to data and privacy, and I don't take it seriously enough. But I've always thought that it can't be a bad thing. Because like you said, most of the good people aren't, like, if somebody saw me sit in front of my computer jacking off, like, let's be honest, I'd be embarrassed as shit. But I wouldn't, it's not, people wouldn't, my friends and family wouldn't assume that I don't masturbate. You know what I mean?
True.
So there's nothing that really at the end of the day that I do that I would be ashamed of. And that with my friends and family, I think that would be the same. And it'd just be like, realistically, with all the data and privacy that we get from people, if we can catch more bad people doing bad things, then
Sure.
I don't have a problem with it. But
Well, let's put it this way. Theoretically, completely agree, right? Like there's no question that sort of data capture and the data retention, all that sort of thing, does catch people doing bad things, right? Fine. But again, that sort of comes down to that accountability thing, like who's in control of the people that are in control of it.
Yeah.
Because right now, it's not a big deal. If you were in a country where it was illegal to be gay, or if it was suddenly decided, even here or somewhere else, that certain things that were immoral, incidentally, never trust anyone who says they're a moral authority. Those people are terrible people. But either way, and that includes me. If I ever start going on about that sort of
I've
thing.
trusted you since you sat down. No, I'm like this. I'm there.
Correct response. But this is the thing. If the rules get changed...
Never trust a purple shirt. No, sorry.
No, you're right. Like, if the public attitude changes, like you've seen it a lot with immigration, you've seen it a lot with sexuality issues, like trans people, like gay people are now in a pretty good position in Australia. Trans people still a little iffy. You know what I mean? There's some progress being made in that sort of direction, but we are making progress in that direction, which also means we could make progress away from it. If the public mood was to change, if something sufficiently terrible happened, how long would it take before we turn to Muslims? You know what I mean? Like just as a group.
Yeah.
A lot of people already have.
Well, a lot of people already have for understandable, if definitely not correct reasons.
Yeah.
Like, it's just fear, man.
It is.
We are
100%.
animals, and it's very easy to trigger us on fear. And as a result, it wouldn't be... It's very plausible that you could end up with a situation where the government's access to information or a private company's access to information could lead to some really serious injustices. And that needs... It's not to say it's happening. It's to say that it could. And if it could, how can we stop them? Right now, we can't.
Yeah.
Right? That is not acceptable. That needs to change. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's that whole thing. I don't have a problem with a company having access to my data, provided that I know what they're doing with it, and provided that I can stop them if they screw with me. Because right now, Google's got access to my what do they have access to? They know where I am. They've got my browsing history. They've got my email. They've got all three of my
exactly
emails.
what you're into.
Yeah, know exactly what they're into.
What you bought.
They could build a
what your
good
house
character
looks like.
profile, but they wouldn't know your darkest, deepest thoughts.
Well, your
On
thoughts
any,
are the only-
not that they're dark, but just your
Yeah.
thoughts on most things.
And I teach
thoughts are the
ethics.
only
I've got
thing.
some pretty dark thoughts.
Yeah, that.
Yeah. Your
But
thoughts might be the only thing that's safe.
They've got all that information. They say they won't share it. I'm taking that on trust right now, and on the vague idea that if they did, the government would do something about it.
If they could sell it and make a profit, they for sure would.
And how do I know they haven't already?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? And this is it's tin foil hat territory to a degree, but it really comes down to that one thing again. If it could be done and there's no consequence for doing it, why the hell wouldn't they? Right?
I'm sure that's how Google AdWords works.
Sure.
Let's just build off your personal profile of everything that you've ever Googled.
Yep.
I'll sell you shit. You know?
Yeah.
I don't mind that though. Sometimes
neither
some
do I.
great things pop up there.
That's I know.
Sure,
I'm
exactly.
like,
I love it.
Yeah, I don't want a bra and lingerie pack. Like, don't send me those ads.
Yeah, that's
send me the shit I like. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, right? Like, the more data you share, the better the system works. There's no getting around that, right? You hear the government's My Health thing, or whatever it was called, My Health thing was. There's no question in my mind that system will save lives. It absolutely will save lives. Having access to all the relevant information about a patient universally in every place you go to will save people's lives. And conversely, not having it will kill people. Right? People will die that don't need to die. That said, I still completely understand and respect why people don't want to be a part of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Because after the whole census bullshit and now this, I don't trust the government. Sorry. Maybe you could do something to demonstrate that I should.
Earn trust.
Earn trust, exactly. And once again, prove it. It's nice to say. You can turn around and say, we take the highest standard, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's nice words. Prove it to me. Let's see some transparency. Let's see some good governance arrangements. Let's see third parties that can regulate you if you screw up. Right now, we don't have it. Needs to come around.
Definitely. Do you see your industry growing, like as in the 3 people that it is now? Like, where would you like to see it go?
I would like to see me redundant. honestly. Like the ultimate goal with this sort of work is that everyone's got the same capacity that I do to do this sort of stuff. Like at the end of the day, like we talked about those two different ethical frameworks before, deontology, utilitarianism. I don't care which one people use. I care that they know which one they're using and they know why they're doing it.
They understand it.
I want to be able to sit down with anyone, any punter. I'm not talking down the pub. I want to be able to sit down with anyone and them to explain to me, this is how I make decisions and this is why it's a good idea. Not a big ask, because they already do it. Everyone already does this. The real irony of working in ethics is that everyone's an ethicist. Everyone does this all the time. You make complex decisions all the time. But the thing is you don't necessarily know how to explain to me why you're doing what you're doing or what you're doing to achieve that. Having clarity on that approach takes some work. It can be very scary, but that's part of my job is basically to ease people through that process, because if you leave it up to them themselves, it can be actually kind of traumatic. So yeah, end goal here is that everyone's able to do that. Really, explain to me what you want and how you're doing it and why your approach is going to work.
Very good. Gordon, we've got to get you out of here, my friend. Do you have about 4 minutes for some rapid fire questions?
Yeah, go for it, man.
So, Tommy normally asks, we normally do 6 from 6. My old co-host had 3 questions. I've got 3. You got any questions?
No.
All right, cool. I'll run through my questions and maybe if I can remember 1 or 2 of Tommy's, then we'll get you out of here.
Sure.
So, your favourite travel destination on the planet, favourite place you like to go on holiday and spend some time?
Jesus. It's been a lot of places. I've got a lot of love for Europe, but I've got to say I like a good hike. I like to get up to Mount Bogong or the Bogong High Plains up in Victoria.
Cool.
Great answer.
Very
I think I remember one of Tommy's questions. Could be yours, but I'm going to steal it. If you're on a deserted island, you could take one item. What would it be? Is that correct?
Yeah, that was one of my original ones, except it was 3, and I don't ask that anymore, so that's perfect.
We'll go with 1.
Yeah, there you go.
Satellite phone.
Satellite
Lame
phone.
answer. I know. Lame
Facebook.
answer. No.
Facebook's going with you anyway.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Know
it's in the
exactly where you are.
Shit, man. I don't know. Like, can I bring a person? It'd be nice to bring another person.
True. You could have Wilson.
Yeah,
Take the ball.
Yeah, you can have a made-up person.
Yeah. No, probably stick with the satellite phone. I hate to say it, lame as that is, but yeah, there it is.
Wow. Very lame. And my second question is dream travel destination, top of your bucket list, place you haven't been.
Probably Iceland, honestly. Ooh. Yeah, it's funny because there's no shortage of places I want to go. I really want to see China, but it's things, it's people and ideas that I want to see. So much of the US I want to see as well. But in terms of like a specific location, Iceland, no question.
Cool.
Go up and
fantastic.
See that. Yeah.
I was in Iceland last year. It was unfathomably beautiful.
Yeah, fantastic.
Really awesome. My last question is, any book that you like to recommend? Can be a graphic novel, can be a autobiography, can be anything.
Yeah, definitely. The Dictator's Handbook. Check it out. Like, this has informed a lot of my thinking as well. It sounds sinister, and it slightly is actually. It's about why so often in politics or governance in general, bad behaviour is rewarded.
Yep.
Because it often is, and they do an incredibly good job of explaining that. Very, very good job. Thoroughly recommend. Dictator's Handbook.
Yeah, cool. You got any more sneaky ones?
No, I can't remember too much.
Done and dusted. All right, we got to get you out of here, Gordon. Where can people find out more about you and what you do? Anything you want to plug?
Find me on LinkedIn, just Gordon Young, or you can look me up on online, ethilogical.com, and just check me out. I'm around the place.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, fellas. Thanks
for
having me.
That was interesting.
No worries. And that's a wrap.
Discovery Roger, go for deploy.